Well, by this time, the people of Egypt were saying, Pharaoh, could you get rid of these people? I mean, we can't take this anymore. And so Moses just came before Pharaoh, and he says, you're never going to see me again. He said, you're never going to see my face again. But he announced. He said, God is going to kill the firstborn of every animal, every cattle of the field, and of every human being. Now, do you ever think about this? Have you ever gone by a stockyard and looked at all those cows out there? Have you ever wondered how to pick out which one was the firstborn in each family? I mean, you couldn't even tell who was the father and who was the mother, right? You know, God said the firstborn of every field animal and the firstborn of every male of all of the children I'm going to kill tonight. But if you will take a little bowl of blood taken by cutting the throat of a little lamb, hold the bowl under there, let the lifeblood of that lamb gush out, and it give its life for you to get that blood. And if you'll take that and go out and get some hyssop sticks, bundle them together, and take those hyssop sticks and put it in your bowl and paint, kind of like graffiti around your door, put blood on both sides of your door and over the top. God says, if you'll do that, I won't kill your firstborn cow and I won't kill your firstborn son. You know what people said? I'm not going to ruin my brand new... I just had my house painted. You think I would put blood on my house? Blood? What a gory thing. I'm not going to kill a lamb. That night, nothing we can imagine could come close to what happened on Passover night. Life was going on in Egypt kind of like normal. That pest Moses had caused some problems, but nothing we couldn't forget. But from cradle to stall, all the firstborn known only to God were struck. And that night, the wail and moans must have been indescribably chilling. Can you imagine all the people hearing a sound, the sound of the death angel? Maybe a whirring sound, maybe a sound of a sword. They heard something, and they kind of wondered if that old Moses, has been right so far, but not this. I'm sure that they bolted their doors. I'm sure they closed their windows. I'm sure that they put the baby between them if they had a firstborn son. But that night, the death angel crossed Egypt, and there was not a home that didn't face his destructive power, except those that had blood over the door. Why did God do this? Number one, to say that only blood, the blood of God's sacrifice. And by the way, there are a couple things you can fill in. We'll go. To tell them that only blood could keep his wrath at bay. Egypt was powerful and pampered, but on that night the death angel would make an unforgettable visit. There's some powerful lessons built into Passover. Let's talk about them. Number one, it was unspeakable. You don't have to write anything down, but let me read this to you. To even imagine a supernatural messenger of doom was to hunt and kill your firstborn was beyond words. But that anyone could pick out the firstborn of man and livestock in the unlit blackness of an Egyptian night was imperceivable. And to know it was tonight was beyond words. Can you imagine the fear of those people as they went to bed that night? I can imagine all the Jewish boys saying, Dad, let's go out and check the door. Did you do it? Oh, okay, yeah, there's blood. Okay, Dad. I'm firstborn. I want to make it through. Can you imagine how much more the kids believed in God? They participated. I mean, they were afraid. Secondly, it was unavoidable. There was no place to hide. There was no family he didn't visit. Every family would be noticed and examined, from the poorest to the richest, from those living in huts of the farming peasants to those in the ivory halls of the palaces, and all would see the dark shadow of the death angel come over their house. It was unavoidable. Thirdly, it was unstoppable. There was no power on earth. There was nothing then or now that could have stopped that stalking death. There was nothing that would deflect his sword except blood. And it was unexpected. Life was moving along as expected. Business was as usual. That old fanatic was still crying judgment, but we live in a real world, not some world of a God who can't see and he can't judge us. Remember, the gods of Egypt were put to bed every night in their temples and awakened each day and fed and clothed and put on display. Doesn't that sound just like what people say about preaching about hell? You ever think about that? Those old fuddy-duddies still trying to bother me at work. Those old preachers still talking about their hell. It's impossible. People are going to be just as shocked as the children who are the parents of the children who died in the Passover plague. Well, here you can fill in. There was a full salvation. God's offer was, number one, salvation. You can write that on that line. God offered a way out, salvation. Secondly, God's plan was substitution. And did you know, I want you to understand, if you want to know what the gospel is all about, the center of the gospel, if you want to make sure, a lot of people come to me, In fact, one of the main reasons people come to me, they want to make sure they're saved. I just talked to a lovely gentleman. His name is, what is his name? Boston was his name. His first name was Boston. He was just an interesting fellow, lives up in North Tulsa, and he wasn't sure he was saved. He wanted to talk about that. And I said, if you want to make sure that you're truly a born-again person, you've got to understand the concept of substitution. You know what that is? He gave himself for me. It's not as much as I can do good plus God. It's not whether I've done enough or if I've been religious or prayed the right words or... none of that matters. You can pray the wrong words and get saved. If you realize that Jesus gave himself for me. Because God's plan is substitution. Thirdly, God's method was a sprinkling of blood. And the one that gave himself for us was Jesus Christ. In Exodus, it was the blood splattered from an innocent lamb over the doorpost. For us, it was the innocent, spotless Lamb of God whose blood was splattered and sprinkled out for us. And finally, God's promise was sufficient. God included in his promise not only deliverance from death, you didn't get killed by the death angel, but provisions of all needs for life, and you could go to the promised land. Now, isn't that neat? So what does the Lord want us to remember? The Passover. What should you remember out of the whole book of Exodus? The Passover. And what about it? That it was all about God's offer of salvation. His plan was substitution. His method was the sprinkling of blood. And his promise is sufficient. I hope that you'll always remember how wonderful the book of Exodus is.